All right, and let's go ahead and get started. We'll go to, okay, that seems to be good. Nextjs docs, documentation, we'll install, create next app at latest, okay, J, hop into the terminal, and we'll just paste in that command, add a space and a dot, so we can install it in the current directory. Excuse me. And for this project, we'll say no to TypeScript, yes to ESLint, yes to Tailwind, no to the SRC, yes to the app router, no to the turbo pack, no to the import alias, and we'll give it a few minutes to finish installing. Okay, and before we spin up the application, let me do a couple things. First, we'll need to make sure that this is the latest version of Next and React is compatible with all the dependencies. So I'm just going to paste in some code from one of my GitHub repos that will help with that dilemma. Excuse me, and I'll be sure to have this linked in the description below. But just basically doing a little bit of override and designating the package manager. So we'll go back to the package.json and paste that in. And for right now, we'll just close that out. In the app directory, let's update this div and replace it with a new div that has homepage enclosed. And then the last thing we'll do for right now is in the root directory, let's just go ahead and remove the existing default excuse me, CSS, and we'll just add some optional CSS that's not necessarily relevant to the project functionality, but just for styling purposes, how I like to have it. So this is just saying for the HTML body and the HTML itself and the root, we want to designate, I'm sorry, we also need to include the app, forgot. So for HTML, body, root, and app, we want to set the height to 100%, the width to 100%, and we'll say at apply text We want to set the text to small. Go ahead and save this, and we'll confirm that it's working later. For right now, what I want to do is go ahead and set up Prisma. And Prisma will be the ORM of choice, and we'll be connecting to a Postgres database via Vercel. So to kick us off, we'll in the terminal, we'll type npm i-d Prisma, and this is going to install Prisma as a dev dependency. Give it a few seconds to finish installing. Next, we want to install the Prisma client, and I'm going to bore you going through the docs, but it is listed there. That's npm i at prisma/client. Press enter. Next, we want to initialize Prisma, and the way we'll do so is by typing npx prisma init, and this should add a Prisma directory with a schema.prisma file, and we'll need to update the database and add our models within this file. So let's go ahead and add our database now. We'll be using Vercel. Let's go to login. And we'll log in with GitHub. This is typically this would already be done, but because I'm in a private browser, I'm going to have to re-log in, but it's going to take a moment. Once you're logged in, you're able to use a free tier. Obviously, I have a paid tier. I think it's like $20 a month for the level of service that I have, but you can do this for free. And what you want to do is on this particular window, is once you logged in, it should default to the overview page. Click on storage. And what we want to do is create a database. Let me see. Which one do I want to use? Go back. Go to my team, storage, and we're going to create a database, and we'll be creating a Postgres database. Click continue. I'm just going to name this my app. Feel free to name it whatever you like. Click create, and we'll click on the .env.local, and we'll copy it, and we'll replace the database string that's already there with what we just copied. This will now be the database. Then we'll click on Prisma, and let's just copy the database source, the data source, excuse me, for our database, and then we'll just replace what's in the schema.prisma file with what we just copied from Vercel. So we actually are done with Vercel for this project. Now I want to add some authentication, and we're going to use authjs for that. So we'll just go to the authjs docs, and we'll click on get started. And for this project, of course, we're using Nextjs, so we'll follow the quick start guide for Nextjs. Then we'll install the next-auth at beta command. Then we'll need a auth secret, and this should be stored within our environment variable. .env, paste it in, and just going to add a secret. Feel free to customize this so that it's more secure than what I have here. And we'll also add this file to the .git ignore. That way when we send this to GitHub, this file is ignored. And now we want to add the auth.ts file. So in the root directory, add auth.ts. And then we want to add a route handler. And so we'll just copy everything from API to the closing bracket that has the next off, or 3 dots to next off. And then we'll go to the app directory, add a folder, and paste in the copied language or text that we just copied from the docs. And then while the arrow caret is pointing down, let's add a file named route.ts. And we want to add the handlers. And of course, we're going to be using get and post. We'll paste that in and save the file. And we're not going to worry about any middleware for this project. But next up, we'll need to add the adapters. And we'll be using Prisma, of course. So first up, we'll need to install the Prisma client again and the Prisma adapter. We'll probably have to install the client again, but I'm just going to, since it is suggested there. And of course, the first step is to follow the process on the Prisma docs, but we've already done that. And then we'll need to install Prisma. And then while it is installing, the next thing we'll need to do is add this Prisma function. And we're just going to copy it just as is and place it in a file named prisma.ts. So in the root directory, let's add a folder first named lib. And inside of it, add a file named prisma.ts. Now let's paste in the connection function that we copied from the docs. And then next up, inside of the auth.ts, we need to bring in the Prisma adapter and then distinguish the adapter as the Prisma adapter. And what we want to run inside of that function is the Prisma function that we just created. So first, inside of the auth.ts, we'll go ahead and paste in the adapter. Then we'll need to add adapter and set it equal to the Prisma adapter. And right now we are getting an error back on Prisma. So what I'm gonna do to bring in the correct Prisma version is we'll add the M&A at the end of Prisma once I deleted it, and it should automatically recommend to bring it in from the ./lib/Prisma file that we just created. And it did. We'll click save. And we're not going to be impacted by the edge compatibility in this project. But now we do need to copy the model and update it within the schema.prisma file. So I'm going to copy everything from this snippet except for the database source and the client. You could have copied it, but you'll need to remove the duplicate because that's already within the file. So if I go back to schema.prisma, we can paste it in. And we don't need the authenticator model, so we can go ahead and remove that model. And we'll need to remove it from the user model as well. So this is almost perfect. The only thing we'll need to do now is add the client model. And once we add the client model, make sure that there's a relation between the client model and the user, because we want the user to have the ability to get all of their created clients, as this is a personal client tracker. So within the model directory, or excuse me, within the schema.prisma file, at the bottom, let's add a model named client. And for the model, let's just go ahead and copy the ID because we will need it to distinguish each particular model, each client model, excuse me. And clients will have a name and we'll store that as a string. Clean this up a little bit. Our clients will, they'll also have a, I think we'll give them, let me see, we did a name. What else do we want them to have? I know we want total as a float, so we could just go ahead and include that now. We'll say total, store it as a float. We'll do created at and updated at just so we can store it. Okay. I'm trying to think, is there anything else? I feel like I am missing something that I would want to have with this model. Status. Status is going to be a string. And I think we'll want to set the status to be a enum eventually. And the way we'll go about doing that is we'll set a default for the status. That way, when we create it, it'll automatically have a default value. So we'll say at default, and then we'll go, the default will be unpaid, because this is either going to be paid or, we don't have to worry about that part. We'll just keep the string at UU. Yep. And we'll set the default to that. All right. So now with this updated, what we'll need to do next is create the relation between the client and the user. So I'll go to the user first and we'll just say clients. And this will be client as a empty array. And then inside of the clients, we can remove that. I want the user. Let's do this. Let's say user email, and we're going to store this as a string. And then we'll say user. It's going to be related to the user model. At relation, we'll say fields, fields. It's going to be user email, and it's going to reference the email. And we can come out of that, and we'll say on delete, we want to cascade. Okay, this looks pretty good. So with this cared for, the next thing we want to do before we push these changes to the database is go ahead and add in the Google authentication. So if we go back to the docs and we go to providers, the auth provider for this project is going to be Google, and there's a ton of them you can add. The process is going to be fairly simple or fairly similar to this, but the big thing is to make sure that you are creating or caring for the callback. So we'll need the store the Google ID and the Google secret in our environment variables. So I'm gonna paste that in there. And where we'll get these from is from the Google console. I already have a Google account. I think I'm probably at the max right now. So if you need help with setting one up, it's super simple. I'll include a link in the bio of how to set one up. But basically, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this information from an existing project that I already have. So give me just a moment to get logged in. I think I'm at my max of how many projects I can create at this point between school and just personal things I've been working on. But it's okay. Next time I'll be sure to delete and start from scratch for those that might need it. So we'll just go to credentials once you're logged in. I'm not worried about that. I'm gonna grab the client ID from right here. And once you click inside of the web app, I just name mine web client 1. Feel free to name it whatever you want as you're going through the setup. I'm gonna grab the secret next. Then just paste it in. Be sure to save and close this out. And the big thing is when you are setting one up, you need to make sure that the authorized redirect is set to this. One way to troubleshoot it if you set it up incorrectly is to really leverage the console, the terminal. If you do that, it'll basically tell you what's missing, whether it's an off secret or whether it's the callback isn't set up properly. And if you Google the error message, you can find the correct way to set it up. But there's a ton of videos on YouTube, and I'm going to put one that I've set up previously in the description that you can reference. It's just for this project. I'm not going to worry about setting one up. So once you've added the environment variables, next up, you want to update the auth.ts file by bringing in the Google as a provider. So we'll go to auth.ts, Google there, and go to providers. And we'll keep going. We're not going to worry about any of this information. So now we are ready to push these changes to our database, Prisma, so that it now has all of the models that we have created within the schema.prisma file. And let me think. Actually, if we go to the adapters, actually could have probably was in this too. I think this is it right here. That's the command that we want, but it's right here as well. So now that we're ready to push these changes to the database, I'm gonna paste in this command npm exec prisma migrate dev and press enter. And it is telling me that we have an error. User email string. Okay. Let's see what we got. At relation. Fields. References the email. User, yep, that looks good. User email the string. Status is set to default now. Sorry about that. Looks like I might have forgot a colon. Little one came in the room. Let's try this command again. There we go. It's pretty good now. I think it's going to ask me to name it. That is where we will name it a knit. Okay. That has been updated successfully. And last but not least, we'll run npx prisma generate. Okay. So now we are ready to see or to test out the authentication to make sure that it works. So we'll run the command npm run dev, and I'm going to open a new terminal and type in the command npx prisma studio. And this is just going to give me a database interface via Prisma, just so we can see what's being stored in the database. So as of right now, we don't have any users, but we do see the columns for the table. So we'll just go ahead and minimize this for right now. And tell you what, let's go to let's go to localhost 3000, and we should see home page initially. Okay, we do. So now let's work on bringing in or confirming that the Google authentication is working. So we'll close out the schema.prisma file and the auth.ts. We no longer need it. And we'll actually minimize the terminal. Actually, we can just close it out. And we'll go back to the root directory. Let's create a folder named components. In it, let's add a file or folder named header. And we'll also add a folder named sidebar. And I want to organize the files a little bit, the routes a little bit. So in the root directory, inside of the app folder, let's create a route grouping named website. And the way we create a grouping is to enclose it with parentheses. So I'll do open parentheses, website, close parentheses. And then we're going to drag the page.tsx that's in the app directory inside of the website directory. And I also want to create a separate layout that's not associated with the root layout. And I'm just going to copy the children in the children.node, React node that was passed in. We'll close that out. Inside of the website directory, let's add a file named layout.tsx. And I'm going to use the RFCE snippet to create a export default of layout. We'll pass in the children that we just copied, and then within the div enclosed in brackets, we'll pass in children. That way we now have a separate layout file for styling and passing in props or whatever else we want to use it for. So let's go ahead and bring in the header component that we just created. So at the top of the file, let's type in import with a capital H header. And we haven't created the file yet. We just created the folder. Sorry. So let's go back to the root directory inside of components. Let's add a folder, a file inside of the header folder named header.tsx. And here we'll create the header function or const name header. Be sure that you capitalize it. And I'm just going to replace this div with the header tag and just put header within the tag. Close this out, go back to the layout, and above the children, I want the header to be on top of the or within the page, but on top of the main layout. So if you bring the header in, and the way I brought it in is by typing the lowercase bracket capital HEAD, and it'll automatically come up with recommendations. And I just found the one that is at component/header/header. Click save and go back to localhost. You'll see that we now have header and home page on the screen. So the ability to bring in imports, it is working properly. So now let's just see if we have the, and thanks so much for the shout out, my friend Vashal. But let's just see or confirm that the login information is working. So I'm gonna go back to the installation, scroll down, and we'll go to OAuth, Google, and I think it is, here it is right here. Here's the sign-in component. So I'm just going to copy this. And inside of the header directory, let's add a file named sign-in-btn.tsx. And we actually can just copy the code that we can paste the code that we just copied from the documentation. Basically, what we have is a function that's going to run sign in from the auth provider, and we'll be leveraging the Google sign in because that is the OAuth provider that we've configured within the project. So we can just go ahead and save this, and then back inside of the root directory, inside of components, inside of the header folder, let's add another file named sign out -btn.tsx, and we'll just paste in this code, but instead of it saying sign in, we'll just change it to sign out. Instead of it awaiting sign in, we want to grab sign out, and be sure you are bringing this in from @/auth, and it should look like this, and we actually can remove sign in. Now that we have sign out, we no longer need to call out or distinguish Google within the function, so we can remove that. And then last but not least, instead of it saying sign in with Google, let's just have sign out for right now. We'll click save. So for right now, we can close those out. And to make sure or to see if this is working, we're going to go back to the header component. First thing we'll need to do is mark this as a asynchronous component. Reason being is because we'll be making a request and we're going to have to await a response back from the server. So we need to make sure that our components align with the action that we'll be partaking in. So we'll start by setting this as asynchronous, and then we'll create a const named session and set it equal to await. And what we need to await is auth. And the easiest way to bring this in, or how I like to bring it in, is begin to type out AUTH. And you'll notice that the first option is @/auth. So if you press enter, it's going to automatically import it. Now we just need to call this particular function. And the way we call it, same way we'll call any function, is by including the open and close parentheses after it. And next, I want to have a const name user email, just so that we can see the user's information. And we're going to set this equal to session.user.email. Be sure to include the question marks after session and after user, and then .email. That way, we're caring for the possibility that we may not have a session and how we want to react based on not having a session. So last but not least, what I want to do is see or display a sign in and sign out button in the event we have a session. So if we have a session, I want to show sign out, and I also want to show the user's email just so we can see what user is logged in. And if we don't have a session, we want to show the sign in button and give the user the ability to log in via Google. So the way we'll do that is by doing this. Let's add a inside of the header, remove the text, and let's add a nav tag. And for right now, only thing I want to do is let's just see it on screen. So inside of the nav tab, we're going to want to run some conditional JavaScript. And the way we run JavaScript inside of a React application is by enclosing it with curly braces. So we'll start with curly braces, then say session with a question mark. And then outside of it, we want to pass in two parentheses, which will represent what we're going to do if we have a session. And if we don't have a session, we're going to have the colon there, which represents or. We'll pass in two additional parentheses. And I'm going to just pass in some fragments for right now. I'm going to place them in both so we no longer are getting an error message and React is no longer upset with us. So if we have a session, what I want to do is I want to show the number one, a sign out button, because that means that we already have a logged in user. So instead of instead of the fragments, I'm going to replace it with a div. We'll give it a class name of flex and item centered. And I'll put a little bit of space. We're going to change this later, but I just want to have something on screen for right now. First thing I want to show is the user email, and that is the variable that we created here. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to show sign out. And this is going to come from ./sign out /btn, which is the component that we just created, server component. And so this is saying that if we have a session, we want to see the user email and sign out. And if we don't have a session, then we want to see sign in. And I'll import that the same way. So now we have conditional rendering in the event we have a session, and if we don't. So let's just save the file and go back to localhost and see what we have. I'm just going to refresh the screen. Now, so now you see we're currently showing sign in with Google. So this means that we don't have a session. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on sign in with Google and follow the steps from there. We're being redirected, which is a great sign. We're going to log in with the JA We'll click continue. This is the name of our project that we are reusing, but you'll see your name if you created a new Google project. And then now, once we've signed in, you see that it now says the jadad@gmail.com, and we have the ability to sign out. So let's just make sure this is working and make sure, well, we see the authentication is working, but let's make sure that we are saving or persisting the user in the database. And the way we'll check it is by going to our Prisma studio. And I think if we just go to localhost 555, localhost 5555, press enter. That's going to take us to our Prisma studio. And if we click on user, we're going to see that we now have a user persisted within the database. So this means that anytime we have a logged in user, if they log in for the first time, we're going to be able to see them stored within the database. We can see that this user doesn't have any clients created. We do have one account and one session associated with this logged in user. So perfect. This appears to be working perfectly. So we've set up the ability to, so we've set up the connection to Prisma, to Postgres using Prisma as the ORM. We've also set up Google Authentication so we can secure our website. And we've also used the Prisma adapter to store the user within our Postgres database. That way we're able to store the session and also their Google account. So users can now create clients and also maintain authentication on our website. So with the first portion of the heavy lifting cared for, the next thing we want to do is set up the overall design. and we'll just use some basic styling from Tailwind CSS and some grid to kind of help us navigate through that. So we'll go ahead and focus on that now. So for right now, we'll just close out the header.tsx file, and I want to shift my focus to the main layout. What we want to accomplish for this layout is to have a responsive design where we have a sidebar that has all of our route link navigations, and we'll be able to distinguish what route we're on by highlighting the link. We're going to have a header here that will only have the logged in user and a logout button so that that user can log out. And if they don't have any clients, then we'll just display a message back to the user that's saying, hey, create your first client today. If it's a logged in user with no clients, if it's a logged out user with no clients, then we may end up just showing sign in to create your first client today. But we'll kind of care for the authentication portion later on. For right now, let's focus on the design, and we're going to have a sidebar and a header, and then we'll have our main content here. The big thing with the sidebar is on desktop versions, we're going to be able to see the icon and the text, and it'll be distinguished based upon the route that we're on. We'll use path name to help with that. On small devices, we're only going to see the icon and not the text, but we'll still have full functionality to the content within the page. So let's go ahead and work on building out that layout now. So I think first place we'll start is within the layout.tsx file. So this initial div, the first div, let's go ahead and give it a class name and set the height to full. And for right now, I'm just going to set the background to purple 200. This should take up the entire screen because remember, we set the height to 100% for the app, the root, the HTML, and the body within the global.css. So going back to our localhost 3000, the entire page is purple. So that's great. We'll remove that for right now. Now within this layout, we can go ahead and highlight. Let's just go ahead and remove this header for right now. And the children tag, we'll copy and delete it. Let's add another div. This div is going to set the overall layout of our site. So we'll give it a class name of grid, and we'll go grid calls 8 on small devices. And on large devices, we're going to go grid calls 12. I'm going to set the height to full. And we can go ahead and let's add one more div within this div, and then I'm going to paste in the children. This is going to care for how we'll style the main content. And then we'll also need to, why is that throwing the error? Can't find div. There we go. Maybe I had something typed in wrong. Okay, so I won't worry about that one just yet. We'll come back to it. But let's go ahead and create a div for the sidebar. And this is going to be for the main content. So within the second div that we created, let's add another div. And we'll give it a class name of column span 1 on small devices. And on large devices, we actually could just we're going to go call span 1 as well. And I'm going to set the border to right. And we'll give this a background of orange 100. And I'll just type in sidebar for right now. Hit save. And you can see that we now have the sidebar, which is taking up, should be 1 column. And we can distinguish that in just a second. And on small devices, it's going to reduce down to 1 column as well. Perfect. So we'll replace this with the actual sidebar component, but we'll fix the layout first. So now within the div that is directly above the children tag, let's add a class name and a width of full. We're going to say columns is going to span 7. And on large devices, we're going to go column span 11. And I'm going to give this a background color just to see what it looks like. We'll go blue 200, hit save. And now you see the main content is going to take up 11 columns on large devices, and the sidebar is going to take up 1. And on small devices, that's condensed to 8 columns, and we have 1 for the sidebar and 7 for the home page. Great. So now let's go ahead and work on this sidebar, and we can actually place the header in its new home, which is going to be directly above the children. And you see it right there, the JA dad and the button to sign out. And then right here, let's go ahead and add in a sidebar. So within the components directory, let's add a file named sidebar.tsx. And we'll do the RFCE snippet to create a component. And we'll name this component sidebar. And I'm just going to replace the text with the sidebar itself. And remember that it is lowercase, less than, and then capital SID. And then you should see it appear as a option @/components/sidebar. We're going to bring that in and just close off that component and go back to localhost. You'll see that the sidebar is now listed there. So I'm going to remove the background color. That was just to show you what it looks like. But now that we have the layout distinguished and we have a sidebar there, can I change this to 1 pixel? I like that size a little better. Okay. So now we are ready to update our sidebar with routes and links and a logo and all of that good information. So we'll go ahead and do that now. So within the sidebar, this is going to be a modular file, if you will, meaning that I want to try to create as many reusable items within it as possible. But for this, I think we'll only need to style the initial sidebar and then pass in the links. So first, let's go ahead and update this to sidebar, and then we're going to set it rac.fc is going to be equal to, and this is just for TypeScript purposes. Inside the return statement, let's remove that div and we're going to replace it. We'll give it a class name, a height of full, set the direction to flex column, and we'll give it a little padding on the Y of 4. Within this div, we're going to have another div with a class name of margin bottom 6. So this first div is going to represent the logo section. And this is nothing relevant to the Crud functionality of the site, just a little bit to add some styling, if you will. So within that second div, we're going to add another div and give it a class name of flex, set the items to centered. We'll go padding on the X of 4, and we'll say space on the X of 3. So this initial div, this div is just going to have the logo, and this is strictly optional. I'm just going to give it a little bit of life, if you will. So I'm going to have a closing div tag so that I can create a circle for the logo. So we'll go div, go ahead and close it off. We'll give it a class name with a width of 8, a height of 8. I'm going to set the background color to gray 600, and we'll say rounded full. And this should create a little circle. Yep. You see there's a little circle right there. And then now underneath that circle, I want the name of the website. And, I haven't really given it any serious thought, just freestyling a little bit today. So I'm just going to name this client tracker. So I'm going to say span and just name it client tracker. And then now you see the client tracker listed there, and you see the gray circle as a icon for the logo, if you will. So I'm gonna go back down to small devices. So actually, I'm gonna leave it like that for right now. Let's style the span. So initially, I want it hidden. So on small devices, you're only going to see the gray circle. On large devices, we'll go block. We'll set the text size to large, the font to bold, and we'll set the text color to gray 800. Hit save. So I think, let me do this. I think for this one, I'm gonna go large. So it is at large block. Let's go with tracker. There we go. That's fine. That looks fine right there. Okay. So now, there we go. And okay, that'll work. And now what I want to do is bring in the links. So within the sidebar directory, let's add a file named sidelinks.tsx. And within this file, we're going to have the routes of where we will be able to link. Excuse me, we're going to have the links that represent the route. So where we'll be able to navigate within the app. So we have the file named side links. Let's just go ahead and add another file named link item.tsx. And inside of the side links, let's just go ahead and mark this as a client side file. And I'm just going to create an RFC snippet that we'll have to update. So we'll say side links, hit save, and we can remove the React. Now let's bring this into our sidebar. So underneath the second closing div, let's go ahead and bring in side links, hit save, go back to localhost, and you see side links are listed here. So that's perfect. And we'll close that out. Oh, we need to save it. There we go. So now inside of the side links, we're going to need a few things in order to bring this page to life, if you will. First, we'll need to bring in path name or use path name. This is a React hook that's going to allow us to, well, this is a feature from Next Navigation from React that's going to allow us to capture the path of the route that we're currently on. And then if that route is an active route, we want to be able to distinguish that link by showing that we're on the page associated with that route. So next thing I want to do is I do want to add a few icons, and to help us with that, I'm going to be using React icons. So back in the terminal, we don't need to close the current terminals. Let's just add a new one, and we'll type in the command npmi react icons and press enter. Okay. We can close this out. So the icons I want to bring in, let's go ahead and bring in import from React icons, and I'm going to use the FI icons. I just like the way they look. The first one I want is home. Then I want $, which is going to represent paid. Then I want FI plus circle, which is going to represent new. And then I'll have FI user, which is going to represent an unpaid client. That'll be the icon for that particular route. And then last but not least, let's go ahead and import the side link, or excuse me, the side item that we just created. So we'll say import side. I don't think we made a function for that just yet. Let me go back to that folder. A link item. Nope, we haven't. Let me go ahead and create a quick component. We'll say RFCE and call it link item. Hit save and go back into side links. Now we'll say import link, and this is going to be the link item from /link-item. Perfect. So we have our imports cared for. Let's update this to reflect a for TypeScript. We'll go react.fc. Now within the side links, what I want to do is first let's get access to path name. And this is going to be equal to use path name that we just imported from Next Navigation. This is client side functionality. So the file had to be marked as use client. Then let's create an array of links. And we could have called this route, but I'm just going to call it links. And we'll set it equal to a open array. And what we want is a bunch of objects. The first key is going to be for href. And I'm going to set that equal to /, which will be the home route. Then we'll have the label, label, and the name of this label is going to be home. Then we'll have a icon, and this is going to be the FI home icon that we have there. And we'll add a comma because we'll need to add 4 more. So instead of typing them all out, I'm going to just copy this and add 3 more objects. The second one is going to be a paid route. No, I'm sorry. Let's do the new route second. So we'll have the /new as the new route. And then we'll add the label of new. And then the icon for this will be plus circle. Then let's have a route for paid. The label will be paid. And the icon for this is going to be $. Last but not least, let's have a unpaid route. The label will be unpaid. And the icon for it is going to be user. Let's hit save. All right, sorry about that. Somebody at the door. Okay, so now with the links or routes in place for our links or route, however you want to look at it, let's go ahead and style out the link item. So I'm just going to remove this div, replace it with another div, give it a class name, and for this, we'll just give this one a class name of space on the Y of 2. And what we want to do is now loop over each of these links. And for each link, we want to map out a link item. And of course, we're going to create or add some additional props to go with it. So we'll start with the looping of the array, the links array. So we'll say links.map. And inside of this, I'm going to pass in a href, not a phref, a href, a label, and an icon. Then we'll come outside of, sorry, this should have been a bracket. This should be a bracket, and we'll come outside of the 1. Sorry, that's not right. Let me start this over. We'll go with links.map. Inside of it, we're going to pass in a href, a label, label, and an icon. And then we'll say inside of it, and for each link item, we want to, that should be icon. Sorry, it should match these objects. That should be icon, not icons. Sorry. And for each link, we want to create a link item. So we'll say link item. And then we're going to pass in a key, which is be the href. We'll pass in, actually, you know what? Let's just do this for right now. Let's go key href dot, well, we just make it just the href. And then we'll close this, hit save. And then now you're seeing 4 link items with a little space on the Y that basically represent the links within, that represent the objects within this links array. So now let's go ahead and start to assign some of its properties. So we'll say the href is going to be a href, set it equal to href, excuse me. And a label is going to be a label, BEL. Then we'll say icon is going to be equal to icon. And then last but not least, I'm going to pass in a is active. And then that is going to be equal to path name to href. And we're going to say the path name or has to match href. So we'll be using 3 equal marks, if you will, for that. Click save. Now let's go back, or let's go to the link item.tsx file, and let's go ahead and begin to style this out. We'll start with the imports up top. Let's bring in from React icons. I want to use the icon type, and this is basically going to allow us to dynamically pass in the icons. And we could have done it a couple different ways, but I think this is probably the easier way. Next, I want to use a package named CLSX, and we'll go to the terminal and type in npm CLSX and press enter. This is just going to allow us to do some conditional rendering with the Tailwind CSS within the TypeScript. So we'll close the file out and let's just import it. We'll import CLSX from CLSX. Okay, and I don't think we'll need anything else. We'll go ahead and bring in link. I'm pretty sure we'll need that. All right. Now, this is a prop, and we are using TypeScript, so we know we'll need to set our interface. So we'll say interface side item props, or link item props, I should say, link item props, and brackets. And of course, we're passing in a href as a string, a icon as icon type, a label, del as a string. This should be lowercase. Last but not least is active. It's going to be a Boolean. It's either active or it's not. Okay. And then now let's update this. So we'll say react.fc. And then we'll have the equal sign. And then right after FC, let's go with lowercase, or excuse me, the less than symbol, and we'll add the name of the props that we're passing in. And we set the interface name to link item props, and we'll close it off. Then inside of the parentheses for the function, let's pass in href. Icon is going to be represented by icon, label, and then is active. Now, inside of the return statement, let's replace the div. And this time it's not going to be with the div. It will be with link. And we can go ahead and close that to make sure we don't get an error for that. We'll need to pass a few things in. First, the link needs to have a href. So href is going to be set to href. We'll also need a class name, and because we're using CLSX, we're going to dynamically pass it in, not pass it in as a string. So we'll go class name and give it the curly braces, and we'll say CLSX, then include parentheses. The first line is going to be it's going to be what the item has in its resting state, if you will. And then we're going to distinguish how we want it presented, if it is active or if it's not. So for right now, we're going to say flex, item centered, a gap of 3, padding on the X of 4, on the Y of 2. We'll say rounded medium, and transition all, and we'll just say relative. And remember, we're going to have within this link, we're going to have a icon and a label. So we want to make sure that the items are centered and the direction is flex. And by default, it's going to be flex row. And then after the initial styling, add a parentheses. And on the second line, this is where we're going to utilize the is active prop that we're passing in. So we're going to say if it is active, the first is going to mean yes. We want the background color to gray 600, and we want the text to be white. And if it is not active, and that's where we'll include the colon for or, and we'll say on hover, we want the background color to be gray 200, and the text color is going to be gray 800. And we'll hit save. Now inside of the link tag, that's going to care for, well, excuse me, that cares for the styling of the link itself. Now inside of the link tag, we're going to add the icon that we brought in, and we want the icon to have a class name of text extra large, and then we'll close it. Then we'll include a span. And be sure to add the closing tag. Okay, just a little delayed. We're going to pass in the label, label, hit save. And if we go back, we'll see that it is already showing up as is. So I don't see one for unpaid. Oh, okay, it just might have been closed out. We're not done styling it. So this is what it looks like on a large device. And as you can see, it's already distinguishing that we're on the home route. So that is the link that is highlighted. But let's go back and finish styling this first. So inside of the span, let's give this a class name of hidden, because on small devices, we don't want to be able to see the label. And if we go back, it's actually hidden on all devices. So let's do this. Let's go hidden. And then on large, let's go with block, BLOCK. Click save. So now we see it, and go to small, and now we don't. Cool. So we see that it is no longer there, the text, once we go to a small device. And let's finish styling this. We'll say the text is small and the font is going to be medium. Click save. And I want to add a little indicator at the end of this. I think I want to remove this rounded and just keep it more blocky. There we go. And then now after the label, the closing span, I'm going to say is active. We'll say div, a closing div. And I'm just going to give it, this is strictly optional, a class name of absolute. Salute. And we'll say right is 0, top will be 0, bottom 0, width will be 2. And I'm going to set the background color to yellow 600. Click save. And then now we have a little yellow background, or a little yellow indicator that we're on that page. We already have the gray listed there, but I just wanted to add that in as well. And if we're on, let me see, WHITE, there we go. There we go. That looks a lot better. If we're on the page or on the route associated with that link, I want the text to be white and the background to be gray. That's perfect. Let's test out these other routes. We haven't created them just yet. And we'll close out the link item. We should be done with it. And we're done with the header for right now, but I'll just leave it open. So we'll need to create a route for new, paid, and unpaid. So within the website directory, let's add a folder named new, and in it a file named page.tsx. We'll also, let's go ahead and add the functional component. So we'll go RFCE, and we'll say new client page and save it. Go back to the website directory. Let's add a page named paid, and in it a file named page.tsx. And we'll name this paid page. Click save. And last, we'll need a unpaid page. So we'll go back to website and add a route named unpaid, and in it a file named page.tsx. We'll give it the RFC snippet, and we'll call this unpaid page. Just click save, and we can close this out. And now let's go back to our local host and refresh the screen. I just want to test out the new routes that we just created. Number one, to make sure the routing is working, but also to make sure that the links are distinguishing the route that we're on. So if I click on new, this is going to take us to the new page. If I click on paid, and you can see the new page is localhost/new. We're on the paid page. You see it right there. We're /paid. That route is highlighted. And if we go to unpaid, you see that we're on the unpaid page /unpaid. So the routing is working properly as well. So I think the next thing that we'll focus on, and someone has to go to a birthday party, but once I get back this evening, the next thing that we'll focus on is adding in the ability to create clients. And then once we can create a client, we'll start displaying the data, add some data cards, add the ability to update and delete clients. And I think that'll pretty much care for everything that we need to have a fully functional client tracker where we have the ability to see quickly if our clients are up to date on their debt that is owed to us. So for that, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the stream for right now. And I'll look for me to pick this back up later on this evening on where we left off.